Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, and joined now, as we are every week on a Friday, by senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, whose weekly appearance on One Bills Live is presented by Pepsi. Pepsi is the official soft drink of the Buffalo Bills. Food deserves Pepsi. All right, Greg, the Bills in desperate need of a bounce-back performance here after a season-low 13-point output in a game in which they were shut out for the first three quarters last week against a perceived to be inferior Miami team. Players, surprisingly, after that game said they played harder than us. To me, that's unacceptable. So a bounce-back performance in need here against a good all-around Bucs team. What stands out to you matchup-wise as potential mismatches in this game, either for Buffalo or Tampa?
I think one thing that they really have to make sure they shore up, and it's been a problem at times, you even mentioned it a number of weeks ago, Brownie, is their blitz pickup, because Todd Bowles is as good as there is at designing pressures. He uses defensive backs as pressure players more than any team in the league, and they get free hitters to the quarterback. And we know that we've seen the Bills struggle with that at times this season, and it's really difficult. I mean, they use Winfield, they use Tyke Smith. They get free hitters to the quarterback. It's one of the things Todd Bowles has done. I can remember watching him 25 years ago when he was a D coordinator, and you would just notice that right away, the way he could structure pressure concepts, attack and break down protections. That's always a big deal when you face a Todd Bowles defense, and that's, as we've said, something that the Bills at times this year have struggled with.
Where did it get away from them last week against the Patriots?
I'm sorry?
Where did that game last week against the Patriots get away from the Bucs?
Their offense last week and even the previous couple of weeks, Steve, has just not had the same rhythm that they had earlier in the season. And of course, they were living dangerously with a lot of late game heroics. Obviously you can't go into a game saying, hey, let's be okay for three and a half quarters and then make some plays, at the end. It doesn't work like that, as you know. But watching that tape this past week of the Patriots, but of course I've seen the other games as well, there's just not a lot of rhythm to their pass game right now. And the run game with Irving out just does not seem to have the same juice. And I know he's already been declared out for this week. So it's just they haven't had that same feel that they had earlier in the season. There are sporadic splash plays. And of course, look, you never know. Baker Mayfield's a really good thrower of the football, probably a lot better than he's given credit for by people when they talk about guys that really throw it well. He's one of those guys. But it just hasn't been there the last couple of weeks, and they haven't had a run game really to bail them out.
I want to get back to their blitz packages and such. Fifth highest blitzing team in the league. You already kind of covered that. I'm just curious because it seems like early in games, sometimes opening series on defense for the Bucs, they will throw an exotic blitz at their opponent that maybe hasn't previously been on film, and they might even do it on 1st and 10. They just don't care, but they like to give the opponent something to think about. They may never call it again, but it looks like Bowles will just throw something exotic at an opponent just to get them thinking about it. To what end do you see that serving them well through the course of games that you have observed of theirs?
Well, I think that's the whole point of it, is show something. People go into playing the Bucs knowing they're going to get pressure. I mean, that's not a surprise when you play Todd Bowles. So what you try to do, I'm sure every coach has his staple pressure concepts, but the ones that blitz a lot, and Todd Bowles has always done this, they always like to add something that looks a little bit different. Maybe someone comes from just a different spot. It might be the same concept, but it's just executed a little bit differently. And now what it does is it makes the offensive line, it makes the quarterback, it just makes the offense have to see things a little bit differently. And that's, when you spend all week, because when you play the Bucs, it's a big homework week for your O-line and your quarterback. I mean, they really have to be prepared, and the thing, and Steve, you know this from when you played with your O-linemen, and you had some really smart ones, obviously, but O-linemen are not necessarily trained to really pick up guys from the third level who are at a distance from the line of scrimmage. You can tell them about it, you can talk to them about it, but when they've got their hand in the dirt, that's a hard thing to deal with, and the Bucs are really good at that.
Let me take that a step further, though, Greg, because we've heard some of the defensive staff members of the Bucs this week talk about how difficult Josh is to bring down, being such a big and strong quarterback. Could you foresee any hesitance on the part of the Bucs to blitz DBs, knowing they might not be big enough to get Josh on the ground?
The reason I don't think that they'll think that way, and I'm not saying they won't, believe me, I'm just giving you my opinion now, Brownie, is I think right now, for any number of reasons, and I'm sure you've discussed this all week, so unless you want to discuss it more, I think for any number of reasons right now, Josh is playing a little too frenetically. And I think they'll want him to play that way. Now, again, that doesn't mean he can't make a special play or two. And if he makes them and you lose, you tip your hat to him. But right now, those plays are not really being made very often for whatever reason. And it would not surprise me if they want him to break down and start to move around. Because this offense, unfortunately, in the past game, has not had, over these last number of weeks, the Chiefs game, there were a couple of plays here and there. But for the most part, over the last month or so, and I think you guys would agree, this past game has not really had a ton of execution structure to it. And I don't think Todd Bowles will go into this game defensively with the idea that, we might not get Josh down to the ground. I think he'll think more in terms of, let's get Josh playing a little chaotically, frenetically, a little randomly, and it just, we would rather him be like that.
You mentioned that the Bucs had trouble getting their rhythm offensively, and then obviously the Bills have gone through that as well.
Yeah.
How do you? With Kincaid out, obviously that leaves a void in their target share. What is your thought about going forward with this group? It looks like Khalil Shakir will be in the game. Give us your thoughts about the Bills' offense, next step it should take.
Well, I think, and I'm just being, as honest as I can be, given that I see, most teams in the league. I think then it comes down to the schematics of the pass game. Look, we know, do they have guys who can necessarily win one-on-one? Maybe not, but that doesn't mean you can't run a pass game. And Steve, you know this. Brownie, you know this too. You've been doing this a long time. There's ways to create, whether against man coverage, to create space for receivers, whether it's through motions, which, by the way, they're a high percentage motion team, whether it's through stacks, bunches, certain kinds of releases. And zone is all about concepts. Zone is about spacing, how you create spacing in your route concepts. And if I'm just being honest, based on watching the Bills, they don't do a very good job of this. And they certainly don't do a good job of it at the intermediate levels, because you can't live on 5-yard passes. We get all excited when we see Khalil Shakir against the Panthers catch, a 5-yard snag route and turn into a 60-yard touchdown, but you can't live on that. You need to have a pass game that works at the intermediate level of the field, and they don't really have one.
Can you even theorize why this passing game doesn't utilize an 18-yard comeback route, a curl route, different route concepts between the numbers? Any theory as to why you would lean away from that based on who you may or may not have?
I would love to be able to answer that, Brownie. I can't get into Joe Brady's head. I don't know how he goes about coaching and structuring a pass game. I can tell you this, and the guys in my matchup room here, because obviously, we work on every team and do the show every week, and we all study tape. I've been talking about this for a year. I don't think the Bills have a pass game that is ultimately what you need. I mean, Josh Allen is the quarterback. It strikes me odd to say that, if they can't run the ball, they can't play offense. You have, in my view, the most talented quarterback in the league. Okay, and I know others share that view as well. Your pass game has to take that into account. Do we ever see deep digs thrown by the Bills? No. And I see that with almost every team. Do we ever see the kind of routes you spoke about, Brownie? That's structuring your pass game to create those kinds of concepts and combinations. That does not require you to have the best boundary X receiver in the league.
So give us an idea, too, as well as the big conversation here in Buffalo is the Buffalo's offense seems to be, even though they're the number one rushing offense in the league, if their running game struggles, they're almost dead in the water offensively.
Yeah, and that just speaks to what we've been saying, Steve, and it shouldn't be like that. I mean, not with the quarterback that you have. So, that's, we're in a sense repeating the same things, but there's no way when Josh Allen is your quarterback that if you don't have a run game that your offense should stall. It should not be like that. I mean, it would seem to me that, a defense, when you play Josh Allen, should be thinking that Josh Allen is the number one guy we got to deal with, but he can't do it by himself, obviously. But
yeah.
And I think what's happening too, and again, I don't know what's in Josh's head, but I think what's happened, whether he's not trusting the process, whether he doesn't feel good about the process, but because of that, he is bailing out of the pocket prematurely when there are throws at times to be made. And again, I can't speak to what's in Josh's head, just like I can't speak to what's in Joe Brady's head. I'm just telling you what the tape shows, and that's what the tape shows. And I think you guys know this.
Flipping it over to the defense, we know Godwin is out, Irving is out, Mike Evans is still on IR. They have relied heavily on their younger receivers. Obviously, Ibuka has been fantastic, but Cameron Johnson, Tez Johnson have had to factor more into the passing game. It looks like Ibuka is kind of their deep over guy, makes a lot of plays between the numbers. So maybe just if you could map out what the concerns are with the players they are currently utilizing in their passing game and what Buffalo's secondary might have to watch out for.
Yeah, that's easy. But just before I do that, did you look at the Bucs for last week against the Patriots, Brownie?
Haven't watched the game yet. Plan to do that tonight.
All right. Well, just take a look. Ibuka caught a 31-yard completion. It was a dig ball. It was a three vertical route concept. You never see that from the Bills. But anyway, just to get back, Ibuka is a guy that he's lined up both outside and in the slot in his rookie season. He's done most of his work on the outside, so he's their boundary X. But he also lines up to trips. They line up much more in 3x1 sets than in 2x2 sets, but that doesn't mean there's no 2x2 sets. Tez Johnson, surprisingly, is a guy that has lined up outside more than he's lined up in the slot, which, given his size, is incredibly surping. I mean,
he's 165 pounds.
Yeah. I mean, I think I weighed that when I was 10 years old, but only 65 of his 172 routes have come out of the slot. There's times, believe it or not, he's lined up as their boundary X. So they really use him and Ibuka all over the formation. They'll play out of two tight ends with Otten and Durham. They're pretty diverse formationally, but they just haven't looked good the last couple of weeks. But they can, again. You know how this league is. They could come up here and look great, or they could continue to not look good. I mean, it's a week-to-week league. It's hard to know the answers. If they were playing the Bucs 4 weeks ago, you'd probably be starting out and telling me that, man, this Bucs pass game looks really good, because that's what it looked like 4 weeks ago.
Right, but Chris Godwin Jr. is out, and Bucky Irving is now out as well. That changes things for the. How does
They've
that
had trouble
change
running
things?
the ball, right?
How does that change things for them?
They've struggled to run the ball, Steve, a lot, and they don't have an explosive back now because Irving could give you explosiveness in the run game. Godwin's obviously just a total pro. Predominantly in his career is lined up in the slot. He's a pro. He's probably a safety valve for the quarterback. I guarantee Baker Mayfield feels he can throw it to him when it's 3rd and 6 and get 8 yards and they just move the chains. They don't have that guy right now. So it just changes your offense, and it shows up. There's just not a lot of rhythm to it. There's not a lot of sustainability to it. They look different. It's not an X and O point, but when you put on the tape, and I know you know what I mean, Steve, from having played for so long, you could just tell when an offense is not playing, it doesn't look the right way. And their offense hasn't really looked the right way.
I will say we saw this last year with Tampa when Godwin went down. the target share for Otten, the tight end, went up. We're seeing that again this year with Godwin not in the lineup, at least in terms of helping them move the sticks. He kind of becomes the possession receiver. Yes. What do you make of Otten's skill set? Is he more of a wall-off, box-out the defender guy, or does he have some route-running prowess to him?
I would say he's much more of a short to intermediate receiver, Brownie. He's not really a vertical dimension, which, of course, that doesn't mean he can never run a seam or never run a wheel route, but that's not his game. He's not that kind of tight end. He's not a Dalton Kincaid kind of guy that has, the kind of movement skill to be able to work at the true intermediate and vertical levels. He's much more of a chain mover and a sustainer. And so is the other tight end, Payne Durham. He's probably even a notch below Otten in terms of his movement. So they're more sustaining type receivers as opposed to intermediate vertical receivers.
Give us a little idea if Buffalo's going to come in and stick to their recipe that we've seen and throw the run game hard at Tampa Bay. Vita Vea down inside is a huge.
Him.
Yeah, you got to block. Yeah, he's a stud.
Block him.
Yeah, he is a stud. Give us an idea of the Buck run defense, how consistent it is, and how it's going.
Yeah, I think I didn't look at the exact numbers. I don't know where they rank. Do you guys know exactly where they rank in run
defense? They're like 11th, I think, against the run.
Yeah, they're almost the top 10.
I think they've got good players. I always go by the players, because in any given week, if you have good players, you got to deal with these guys. Levante David's a really good linebacker still. They've gotten really good play from Servachier Dennis, who this year became the starter with, I guess it happened at the end of last year. He's been really solid for them next to David. They're big up front. They've got really solid players. Now, no matter what the Bills talk about this week, and I'm sure they're working on their pass game, it's not likely they're going to come out tossing it all over the yard. I would think not. So they're going to have to figure out a way to get the run game going. I keep waiting for them, guys, and this is something I'm hoping to see, for them to do something off that staple run, off that staple counter run where Hawes is in motion and Gilliam, crosses formation as the wrapper in what's essentially a counter run game. I'm still waiting for them to work off that, because you can see the defensive reaction. As soon as Hawes goes in motion, you can see how the defense responds. Now, if you block it up, great. Obviously, you can gain some yards. I think they did have a good run, maybe a 14 or 15 yarder this week off that concept. But boy, it's time to get something off that, don't you think? I think you can do something there.
58.5% run on first down. That number's got to come down a little bit, I think. So
I would agree. Like I said, I think with Josh Allen, I think it's somewhere along the line, you got to put the ball in his hands. But I'd really like to see the pass game really have some structure to it. We know what Josh can do, but you can't do that every single week. You can't be special. You can't be Superman every week. You need the pass game to work for the quarterback, not the quarterback to make the pass game. It goes together, but you need the pass game to help the quarterback.
What's interesting is when you're telling us this about Josh and this passing game is you sound an awful lot like you did a couple of weeks ago when you were describing the Chiefs passing game, which you were saying was largely Patrick running around and making something happen, and you can't live that way. It sounds like the Bills are kind of living that way. Or trying to.
And notice that the Chiefs have been up and down too. It's no matter how great your quarterback is, and to my mind, we're dealing with the two best guys in the league. But it's just, Steve. You played it. You can't live like that. You can't roll the ball out and practice on. Yeah, you can't roll the ball out in practice on Wednesday and say, let's run around and make some plays today when it matters. That's not the way you can do it.
The problem is when that happens, people get the idea that when Josh runs around or Pat Mahomes runs around or these guys improvise stuff, and it's that's easy. Just get them back, send your guys down the field, and then have Josh roll out one way or the other. Your guys just get open. It looks easy when it works. It looks like, let's just do that. It doesn't work it's not easy. It's lucky.
No.
It's lucky.
Right. And what makes it even worse is those are all the highlights you see on highlight shows.
That's right.
So people don't see, the other plays. They just see those plays and they think, man, that's the way we got to play.
It just looks so easy when it works. It just looks so easy when it works, and it's just really fortunate when it does work out in your favor. And that's why it's so frustrating, and everybody starts to hammer the wide receiving core when Josh breaks out of contain and all of a sudden, he can't find anybody to throw to. Well, that's because everybody's either running their routes to the other side, or you've got so many defenders back. There's a thousand reasons why it won't work when the quarterback breaks out of the pocket, and nobody wants to hear it.
And nobody shows the plays that don't work when that happens. They just show the ones every once in a while that do.
Yeah, that's right.
Greg, thanks as always for the time. We appreciate it. We'll catch up with you next week.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much.
All right, that's Greg Cosell, senior producer from NFL Films, joining us. Bills Mafia, it's tailgating season, and there's nothing better than an ice-cold Pepsi Zero Sugar to pair with your tailgating food rituals. As the great Josh Allen once said, Bills fans deserve Pepsi. Bills Mafia has brought it this season, and so has Pepsi. Bills tailgates deserve Pepsi. Go Bills.